Hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm meteorologist Taylor Cox, and we are tracking storms across the Midwest ongoing right now as a tornado watch has just been issued across places like Illinois and Indiana. We'll take a look at that here in just a few minutes, but I want to talk about your major weather headlines first. This is what you need to know over the next 5 days in terms of severe weather. Now, today is the most impressive day for storms. We've got a major severe weather outbreak today, which includes all hazards, including that tornado hazard, high wind, and large hail. Tomorrow, that storm risk shifts to the east, where it's mainly a wind event, but you can't rule out a little bit of hail, including hail across Oklahoma and Texas tomorrow. By the time we get to Friday, we take a very brief break, but by Saturday, storms are likely across the plains and a growing risk, more widespread for today than what we saw yesterday, a growing risk for storms on Saturday. Now, we do have an ongoing severe thunderstorm warning from a few showers that we have across the south. I'll talk about that real quick before we get up into the Midwest, because that's where the real show is today. Strong wind speeds are possible, 60-mile-per-hour winds, but the risk for hail down here is very, very low. What we're really watching for is this Midwest system, which is starting, well, it really started this morning, but the second round is starting very, very soon. So we have a preliminary, or just a precautionary, tornado watch ongoing right now. That's highlighted there in pink. It goes until 3 p.m. this afternoon. I do expect many of these places to either have this watch extended or a new one to be issued on top of this one to go into the evening hours. This is just for these spin-up tornadoes that we have from storms ongoing right now. We're going to have more storms forming later on today. So again, 3 o'clock this afternoon, here's your risk for today. We've got 3 areas of storms. 2 that you need to be concerned about is a flooding and tornado issue down in Louisiana into Mississippi. And then, of course, that level 4 risk highlighted there in pink across Illinois and Indiana. Now, the words that the Storm Prediction Center was using to describe the storm risk today was very, very impressive. Not something that we see very often in June at all. I would call this a pretty rare event. Widespread severe weather is expected today. Tornado outbreak possible. That's why we have that level 4 risk issued. But even for others, across St. Louis, just outside of Kansas City, south of Chicago, we've got a level 3 enhanced risk and then a level 2 highlighted in yellow. That's a slight risk, which does include places like Columbus, Kansas City, and then all the way up into Minnesota. Moving on to tomorrow, we shift off to the east, mainly a wind threat here, and then down to the south where we have a tornado threat on Friday. And we'll get to those Gulf storms here in just a few minutes, but I want to talk about today first. So let's start with wind, then we'll move into hail and tornadoes. So here's your wind risk for today. A note here about some of these wind speeds could be very, very strong, stronger than 74 miles an hour. Already this morning, we've seen gusts above 80 miles an hour. And that was just round 1. Round 2 expected to be more intense. Where are we expecting strong wind? Anywhere from Chicago to St. Louis to Indianapolis, with really that main storm zone being in eastern Missouri, all the way through central Illinois and central Indiana. We've got another risk for some strong wind down in Louisiana and Mississippi. We talked about that earlier, right? With that severe thunderstorm warning in Florida. Again, that tornado risk for today, it looks like widespread tornadoes possible anywhere from Indianapolis all the way to the central portion of Illinois. That highlighted there in pink. Actually, let's zoom down into this area so you can see exactly what areas are included. We've got pink anywhere from just east of Indianapolis, including West Indianapolis, and then all the way through the central portion of Illinois. Now, if we zoom back out, I'm going to restart this graphic over again. You can see places like Kansas City are included in that level 1 tornado risk, but I have them included in a level 2 hail risk. So every area has a different set of hazards that we're watching for. We're talking about a lot of areas today, so make sure that you comment where you're watching from, and we'll try to get to all of your weather questions. And hey, speaking of, actually, I want to make sure that everyone who has the HailTrace app to be watching today, did we send an app push this morning before our forecast? Let's send that real quick so that everyone gets the most up-to-date forecast. Okay, let's talk about hail real quick. Now, what we're watching for are mainly on the western side of this risk, That's where we're watching for the most significant hail. So you're going to see this anywhere from Iowa all the way down to Missouri into places like Kansas and portions of Illinois and Indiana. But really we're watching for a tornado risk across Illinois and Indiana, and then farther down to the south it'll be more of a wind risk. But again, you could get any of these hazards in all of these places. Does that make sense? But you can see exactly where we're watching for large hail today. Areas highlighted there in dark orange and even sometimes red. Up to baseball-size hail possible for today. Those hail risks start to die down as we head into the evening hours. I would say after about 9 o'clock tonight. That's whenever we're really starting to see some smaller hail. But until then, we are watching for large hail, including places like Kansas City. So Lulu on YouTube is asking about Kansas City. Let's take a look at the timeline for KC. You can see storms moving through right now. But really, I'm not terribly worried about this for hail. I would watch this long line of storms that's going to form after 2 o'clock today. Kansas City is right on the edge of those storms. We saw this the other day. The front passed Kansas City and storms hit to the south, and Kansas City didn't even get a drop of rain. Something like that could happen again today, but I do think there's a higher likelihood for those storms to form to the north. Storms will go up just right over Kansas City just shortly before your evening commute. You are in the perfect area for large hail. Anywhere from golf ball to maybe up to baseball size hail possible in this area. Now granted, there's a better risk if you're farther off to the east. So as you go farther into Missouri, a much better risk for large hail. So that includes places like southern Iowa and the northern portion of Missouri. Thank you, Barton. I appreciate that app push. We just want to make sure that everyone gets this information because it's a big weather day. What we're really watching for here is take a look at this. We're looking for these isolated supercells right here. They're away from this crowded system. That's going to be your hailers. Those are going to be your long track supercells. Could you get a few supercells in here in the middle of Illinois all the way into Indiana? Absolutely. It's going to be difficult for hail to form in there, but it's still absolutely possible. This will be more of your tornadic system right in here, where I think that we'll have more hailers farther back into Missouri and the western portion of Illinois. I hope that makes sense. And then again, you start to see less yellows and oranges as we head into the evening hours. By 9 o'clock tonight as the sun sets, that hail risk really starts to drop off. So there's your significant hail model. Max forecasted hail size, I already mentioned this for today. To baseball size hail, I think it's going to be very difficult to get those monstrous hail sizes today, like softball size hail. I'm not saying it's out of the question. I just don't think it's very likely. Where are we seeing the largest hail sizes? Again, Kansas City just right on the edge right here. Des Moines also right on the edge. It really depends on where those storms form. You guys could just barely miss out, or you could get hit head on. We'll have to see where those storms form. Smaller hail, but still a really good likelihood for hail in Chicago. And then as these storms continue to track to the south, St. Louis, you guys are also on the risk as those storm risks are going to come later in the day, right? Between maybe 7 and 10 o'clock tonight, that's whenever we start to see the hail risk decreasing. But I wanted to point out some other cities that are just directly in the path for these larger hailstones. We're talking about Ottumwa, Iowa, Kirksville, Missouri, Columbia, Missouri, Springfield, Illinois, Peoria, Illinois, and Champaign, Illinois. And then our risks start to go down as we head farther into Indiana. And that's just for hail. Let's now talk about tornado. Now your tornado risk, we've kind of already mentioned this, right in the middle of these two states between Indiana and Illinois. That's your level 4 tornado risk. Still level 3 tornado risk for St. Louis and that level 2 tornado risk for Kansas City. Now this is the likelihood that you'll see a tornado in your area, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or how many tornadoes we're going to get in this area, right? There's no guarantee, but the most likely area is going to be that area highlighted there in red. Let's clear some of this radar away so that you can see that a little bit better. Chicago in the level 2 risk. Ozzy says, look like we're going to be hit by some bad stuff tonight from southern Ontario, Canada. We don't do a ton of Canada forecasts, but we appreciate you watching, Ozzy. I know that I've seen a lot of videos coming through my social media feeds from Canada, and you guys have seen a lot of hail in that area or up in Canada. Let's talk about the timeline for storms today. We have just a widespread cluster of storms that are expected to move through this afternoon. Actually, one second. This is from this morning. This was that wind risk that we saw this morning. We had 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts, stronger than that, moving across Illinois this morning. It really started to die out as we headed into the mid-morning hours. I'm going to restart this because I really want to talk about timeline here. Okay, here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. So this widespread group of storms is what we're watching for right now. We've got a tornado watch in place. A few of these could be strong, but really what we're watching for right now is that flood risk. We're going to continue to see this move to the southeast through the afternoon hours, most likely intensifying on this leading line right here. Some of these areas could get hit twice. Springfield, Champaign, you guys have that first line of storms coming in. You'll have another line behind that. You could even have another line behind that. After about 2 o'clock this afternoon, we'll start to see this long line, what we call it a broken line of storms. So you can start to see that line of storms, but it's not completely filled in. That forms all the way from Chicago down to Kansas City, which is not on the map right now, but you know, use your imagination, and I'll show the wide view here in just a few minutes. Again, I talked about Peoria and Champaign. You know, you guys are getting this last round of storms as well, as late as maybe 5 o'clock tonight. Some of these storms coming through the evening commute. So keep an eye on the radar before you hit the roads this evening. Storms continue through the overnight hours, but I do think at some point we'll start to see that shift from a hail and tornado risk to a wind and tornado risk, but tornadoes still possible as we head into the late hours tonight. After 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, we could still see a few embedded tornadoes in that long line of storms. Now, John, before I move on, do we have any specific areas that we want to talk about storms today? We're all good right now? Okay, great. Because we've talked about timeline for a few people. We've already talked about Kansas City. We've already talked about Indianapolis, Chicago as well. Here's one last look at your radar. Again, you can see that long line of storms that forms all the way back into Kansas City, St. Louis as the sun goes down. So right around dusk, make sure that you're keeping an eye on the radar, St. Louis. Alrighty, moving on as we shift into the later portion of the week. Storms shift to the east. This powerful storm system just pivots off to the east a little bit. Some strong wind possible on the east coast, but that's really the main risk here. While we have this widespread risk for storms tomorrow, wind is going to be the main factor. Where's the hail? Well, that's going to take you all the way down into Oklahoma and Texas, specifically the Wichita Falls area, where we're not expecting a widespread hail event, but a few isolated larger hailstones are possible. I would say in this area, maybe you could get up to 2 inches, but you're probably talking about some smaller hailstones closer to the size of a ping pong ball. Your tornado risk for tomorrow really focuses down in the southern portion of the U.S., and I have hinted at this already, but I do want to really focus on the Gulf states now. We have a flood risk, we have a tornado risk in this area, not only on Thursday and Friday, but also for today, Thursday, Friday, we have a tornado risk in this area. So to bring in more information about this, I want to bring in meteorologist Martin Lowrimore. He's going to break down exactly why we're seeing this risk across the Gulf states. And even if you're not in that level 4 risk today, what should you be watching for as we head into the end of the work week?
Let me tell you what, it's something that we haven't really talked about in a while. And why is that? Well, it is the tropics. We are seeing our first tropical storm of the season already kicking through. Now, hurricane season started not too long ago, but we're going to be seeing some drastic effects from Tropical Storm Arthur. So we'll first look at our 24-hour rainfall. You can see very high amounts of that moving across the Gulf Coast. It's going to be very impactful as we get into the later part of our next day or so and into our Thursday as well. Looking at these rain chances, look at that large swath across the entirety of the southeast. This stretches from about the boot of Louisiana, moving into Mississippi, Alabama, and even stretching in toward Atlanta. So major metro area could be seeing some pretty drastic effects out of that. So this is what we call our precipitable water. Now, really, you don't really need to know the scientifics behind it. Just know that this area right here is potent, has a lot of that water in the atmosphere, and As gravity always does, it brings it down. So a lot of that water will be falling across parts of those areas. It's kind of that reason why you can actually see that tropical system in this water right there. So again, a lot of that water currently sitting in the atmosphere. The future rainfall totals very, very high amounts across parts of Louisiana and especially into Mississippi. Look at this. We've got this marker right here. This goes up to about 20 inches when we get to that the gray and the black there. We zoom in closer. Look at the amount of rain they're going to be seeing. You could be seeing locally upwards to 2 feet of rain. Now, why is this important? Flash flooding. This is all just within a few days right here. So, 20 inches of rain in just 1 or 2 days, that is going to cause major amounts of flooding. One of the biggest killers in nature is flooding. It really is. Across all different threats, tornadoes, hurricanes, all of the different weather phenomenon, you see mostly that flooding risk is really the big one. And we are going to be seeing major impacts over the next couple of days. Again, this is your level 3 hazard risk for flooding. It does include also in parts of the Midwest with these storms that are kind of rolling through. We're going to see those multiple rounds, but Taylor's going to talk more about that in a little bit. But we're also seeing very major impacts going in across Louisiana and Mississippi. I would not be surprised if this goes to a level 4. With the amount of localized rainfall that is going to be seen in these areas, flooding and flash flooding will be a major issue. And this is not going to be ending anytime soon. It's going to continue into Alabama and Georgia as we get into tomorrow, continuing into your Friday, still seeing more of that impact, more of the tropical moisture going to start filtering in. That will bring in more of the rain there across parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Much needed rain there. But finally, as we get into our Saturday, that tropical system will begin to finally move out of the region, and things are going to be shaping up to be looking a little bit better, but still plenty of rain. That system is not going to be moving very quickly. If you notice with that flood outlook, we're going to go back to that real again. We see this is day 1. We move over, barely move. Day 2, we get into day 3. It's still right there. It's not going to be going anywhere over the next several days. So slow moving tropical system. My mind goes to Harvey. I don't think we're going to be seeing that much rain. That was an abhorrent amount of rain, and those values were much higher as well. But to give you a bit of a perspective, a slow moving tropical system absolutely can cause major amounts of both flash and normal broad scale flooding. So that is going to be the big impact more than likely out of this system. Winds are only sitting around 40 miles an hour currently. So, it could knock over a few things, but flooding will absolutely be a huge risk with this first tropical system. And we're going to be talking more about the tropics later on in just the next couple of weeks. We are kind of pulling together a hurricane forecast, so don't go anywhere with HailTrace. We're going to talk more on that, but Taylor will be back in just a second talking about your forecast.
Thank you, Martin. I think that was a great breakdown about why we're seeing this just very persistent severe weather risk across the Gulf states. We've got 2 areas to watch for today. Obviously, more storms in this area, but still a very, very persistent storm system that's stayed down across the Gulf states that we need to be keeping an eye on. Flooding, tornadoes are going to be the main hazard across this area. So that was a great breakdown. I know that we talked about this earlier in the forecast, but last call for questions here. We have a level 4 severe weather risk for storms today. We'll most likely start to see more severe thunderstorm warnings between about 1 and 2:30 this afternoon. That's whenever things will really start to go up, and we'll be able to see exactly where these storms form. Are they going to form south of Kansas City, or are they going to form to the north? Are we going to see more severe weather as they just initially blow up across places like Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois? More widespread storms across eastern Illinois and the western side of Indiana, including Indianapolis. There's a lot of questions still out there about the storms today. Within the next 2 or 3 hours, I think that a lot of those will be answered. But what we do know is that we're looking at a pretty widespread severe outbreak today. For tomorrow, those storms shift off to the east. We're talking about the East Coast with mainly a wind threat for tomorrow. And then I want to go back to this graphic here because I want to continue into Friday, where our attention shifts down to the south, as Martin was talking about. There's that tornado risk. And then for Saturday, anywhere from South Dakota to Nebraska, all the way up to the northern portion of Kansas for severe weather across the plains. Once again, I do think that marginal risk will be upgraded before we get to Saturday. We just don't know a ton of information about the storm system yet. I do think that we're going to see some sort of hailer system here on Saturday. I mean, we've got there we go. Okay, some oranges and some reds. We've got some oranges and reds on the board here. So maybe we could see some pretty decent hailstorms off in the western portion of Nebraska. We'll keep an eye on that for you this weekend. Other than that, we've got a little bit of a cool down coming, just slightly. I mean, we'll take anything at this point, right? From the upper 90s across a good portion of the southern plains today, it looks like temperatures are going to be cooler than normal for tomorrow. That doesn't last long. We warm right back up afterwards, but we'll take the break even if it's brief. Say that 5 times fast. 88 on Friday, 90 degrees in Kansas City by Friday afternoon, 92 on Saturday, so talk about a very brief break from this heat. Overall, as we head into the end of June, it looks like we'll see a little bit below average in terms of temperatures across the Midwest, and then above average the farther south and west you go. And then we've got more rain than what we would normally see this time of the year for those areas highlighted in green. So your rainfall totals have a decent likelihood to be higher than normal, wetter than normal across most of the U.S. Got a little bit of a dry patch starting to form out in the western side of the U.S. along the Pacific Northwest. There's your forecast. It was packed with severe weather today. This is probably not the last time you'll see us here on our social media pages, so make sure that you follow us. So we'll be live just in a few hours whenever storms start to form. We'll be live whenever they come into Chicago. We'll be live whenever they come into Kansas City. We'll be watching those storms today. So follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, or give us a call for a hail, wind, or tornado map. Meteorologist Martin Lowrimore and I are not the only meteorologists here at HailTrace. We have over 15 meteorologists here at HailTrace. We are always mapping storms, so watch us or take a look at those maps at HailTrace.com. Email us at info@HailTrace.com or give us a call at 855-334-4245 for a wind, tornado, or hail map. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here in a few hours here